Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time zone you are joining. So we are really excited to kind of kickstart this workshop. Just a bit of a uh, direction or housekeeping, so to speak. So you should be able to. We have a couple of slots for Q&As. First one after about 20-25 minutes into the session, and then one in the end. So feel free to type in your question in the chat window. We'll be able to cover that. The topic of this workshop, Disruptive Technologies in Insurance, Optimizing the Current Models and Beyond. Think of this as, for those who have attended the keynote session on the first day, think of this as a bit of an expansion or elaboration of that. So what we are going to do is we are going to be covering this in three parts, right? The first part is we'll look at the imperatives and the context behind the technology that's driving the new tendencies, new implications for insurance, and why the carriers should need to watch out. And we'll follow that up by a session on how the various technologies that enable that impact. Everyone knows that it's not that some of these technologies have come in just new. They've been in existence for quite a number of years, and some of them maybe for decades. But it's just that they're all at a cusp of the right combination of availability and infrastructure, and the combination which can take them to the next level. We'll have a short QA session after that, and then we'll actually do a deep dive on claims process using a couple of the InsurTech solutions that we have on board, right? So that's a broad thing, and we'll finally have a Q&A session to sign off. My name is Rangarajan Srinivasan. I head the insurance solutions for HCL. And we have a very, very experienced and interesting combination of speakers on the workshop panel today. And I'll request them to introduce themselves in a minute or so. So let's do a quick round robin. Peter, do you want to go ahead, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Peter Olesen with McKinsey. I've worked with insurance and technology, I think, for the past 18 years. Work with large corporates on digital and IT topics. I work when large corporates start setting up new digital business builds, and I've worked with a number of InsurTechs, so startups. And actually, InsurTech is one of my key topics that I spend a lot of time on. So very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Peter. Martin?
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invite. My name is Martin Micko. I'm the CCO and one of the founding members of Omnius. We are a deep tech AI company applying artificial intelligence to the automation, specifically in insurance and exclusively on claims management. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you very much.
Raj?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking time today to join this session. I'm Raj Pofale. I'm the founder and CEO of ClaimGenius. We are a computer vision AI InsurTech startup, focused on the passenger vehicles claim assessment. And I'm going to look forward for more deep dive sessions about our product and technologies.
Thanks, Raj. And just finally, my name is Ranga. As I mentioned, I head the insurance solutions. We actually, I have almost 3 decades in the insurance industry, providing technology solutions, including running the technology function for a TPA. I work with, as you can see, HCL IP's products and our offerings in addition to our partner ecosystem, to provide solutions for our carrier brokers and other clients. So really looking forward to this session. The first session, I'll hand it over to Peter to kind of provide the context and imperatives behind what is driving these changes in the insurance industry. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ranga. Yeah, so I'll talk shortly about 3 things, really. So one, what are the trends we're seeing? What could this mean for the business models in insurance in the future, and what requirements does this entail? So those are essentially the 3 topics I'll cover. And let's move right into it on the next page here. So really 3 forces or 3 trends that work currently. So one, obviously on the customer side, so higher expectations, but also new preference perhaps for more digital and in particular for a more integrated customer experience across touch points. So that's number one in terms of the trends and forces we see. The other one is that the classical operating models are under pressure. And I think this has been, greatly accentuated by actually COVID. That has meant that many have had to leapfrog in terms of digitization. What characterizes these pressure on the operating models of classical insurance companies are, first of all, that IT becomes more important and actually increasingly something differentiating for the companies. There is the continued pressure on increased productivity, which is also driving a need for change. And then thirdly, and I think we will get back to this a little bit later when we see the two InsurTechs today. I mean, data and analytics is more and more becoming important for the company in terms of driving success. Being able to leverage the data, but also being able to embed the insights into the actual processes. And then finally, the last sort of macro trend we're seeing is obviously sort of the emergence and entry of new players into the market, with Tesla actually doing insurance, IKEA doing insurance, big travel sites doing insurance, and then a host, several thousands of InsurTechs also entering the market. So those are the trends. And if we move to the next page, Ranga. Then just deep diving on what's happening on sort of the IT side or the digital side in an insurance company. So we do quite a lot and quite elaborate benchmarking across insurance companies. And actually, I think there are two interesting results coming out of this. So the first one is that we've seen a significant increase in actually the IT share of total operating costs. And this is both the case in P&C, but also in life. And I think this shows at least two things. First of all, of course, more spending more on IT, but actually also the reduction at the same time in some of the other cost boxes is actually driven in part by IT through increased automation. So that's one key trend that we are seeing. The other thing that we see as we look deeper into the numbers here is an interesting result. So we actually see that higher IT investment and spend actually drives better performance. So when we compare the combined ratio performance and also the growth over a number of years, actually the insurance companies that spend more on IT perform better. So I think that's an interesting result. And I think many insurance companies are realizing this and actually thinking more and more and devising digital strategies to become more like a tech company. So technology is definitely going to be even more important. And if we then go to the next page and we look into the future and we extrapolate, so what do these trends mean? So the importance of the integrated customer experience, the pressures on the current operating models, and then the new entrants, we probably see a picture a little bit like this. So three different business models that we will see in the future across the insurance value chain. So the classical, using traditional distribution channels, end-to-end insurer that we all know, we will probably still have in the future, but it will look different. So more agile, more tech-enabled. And actually, you could say, well, the likes of Lemonade is a good example of an end-to-end insurer that is doing things in a new way. But equally so, I think many of the incumbent insurers are trying to, at least move towards this sort of more tech agile end-to-end insurer of the future. Then we see business models around ecosystems, sort of intermediaries and platforms. And I think here, sort of many examples, but again, going back to the IKEA example, perhaps you wouldn't have seen this a few years ago, but actually sort of somebody selling, furniture, they actually also now consider insurance as part of their ecosystem. And then finally, we will see, and we are already seeing this, more and more, sort of players taking over back office parts of the value chain, operations, IT, and for that matter, actually carrying the risk. And actually, with the IKEA example, it's actually iptiQ, which from a risk perspective is backed by Swiss Re, that is behind their insurance offering. So an example of that. I think you could also, mention the players that take over closed books like Viridium. You could even mention Allianz's outsourcing of their operating and IT platform in Cincia. And then, of course, Omnius and ClaimGenius that we will talk about later. So InsurTechs that are actually here to perform part of the insurance value chain. I think if this picture holds true, and this is the future that we are heading towards in insurance, then obviously, it accentuates the need to do more and better on IT, but it also requires, in particular, building ecosystem capabilities to allow for this integration, especially with the InsurTechs. And then doing that, actually, perhaps you as an insurer finding out what is it actually that you do well and what you should have others do. And before I end, perhaps we go to the last page here, which gives you an overview of InsurTech activity. So we've been monitoring this for a few years. And I think initially when we started looking at this, first of all, it was mainly a US phenomenon. It was retail and it was P&C. And the most talked about examples were the end-to-end insurance companies like Lemonade and others we were talking about. But actually, when you look into this, and I think we've surveyed more than 2,000 InsurTechs, actually 63% of the InsurTechs are here to cooperate. They are not, to compete head-on with insurance companies, but they are like ClaimGenius and Omnius, actually here to perform parts of the insurance value chain in a better and more innovative and perhaps more technology-enabled way than in the past. The other thing is actually, so in the past it was mainly retail, or it was mainly P&C, and now we also see the emergence of InsurTechs in other lines of business. And then finally, and I think this is also speaks to the relevance of InsurTechs as a source of partnership and innovation, is that in the past mainly retail, but we also now see InsurTechs that have solutions and are relevant both in SME and commercial lines insurance. So in SME, for instance, an example could be Nimbla out of the UK that does credit insurance, leveraging cloud accounting platforms, or it could be for commercial lines insurance, the likes of Windward that have very interesting analytic solutions around marine and marine insurance. I think before I end here, I think there are sort of a couple of takeaways here. I think, partnership ecosystem capabilities is going to be important to succeed in the future. There are many InsurTechs out there that could be relevant to partner with, and they have interesting solutions that could provide sort of a pathway and an easier pathway digital. And with this, I think I'll hand over to you, Ranga, to take us further.
Thanks, Peter. There are three, I think, from what Peter mentioned, if you followed that closely, there were three implications, if I can quickly summarize it as a takeaway for the next section. First thing is there is a significant customer demand and influence that's causing some of this, right? Whether a need to engage them in a very personalized manner, more proactive engagement, helping them do the necessary transactions in a more in a way that's aligned to their choice of engagement. While that is the primary driver, the second driver is also this key point about the traditional models are not just going to disappear tomorrow. So what is this fine balance between optimizing the current models while you use pieces of this technology and the solutions it offers to optimize the current models, while you also look into how we can enable entirely new models from that? That's a second implication. And last but not the least is no longer it's all about someone doing it all by themselves. It's about this bringing together this entire ecosystem, collection of InsurTechs, other point solutions, other core systems. It's all together in a form where the interplay results in the outcome that we desire. What you see is a kind of a simplified depiction of that. In the keynote that we heard on the first day, 10 disruptors were used to kind of indicate what is being done now, how the technology is kind of getting hardened, and which it is going to enable. So what we have done is we have taken three aspects of it, or three pieces of that. Obviously, advanced analytics is one, blockchain and IoT. What you're seeing in the screen now is a depiction of how the same technologies are offering an optimization for the traditional models, but they can also enable newer models. And I'll take a couple of examples in the interest of time to kind of illustrate how that works. If you take IoT as an example, there are enough case studies and examples, and HCL, we ourselves have done a bunch of information gathering solutions for some of our clients, where either the devices or images, or in some cases even drones, do kind of a property assessment or something, and you just collect the data, and the data can either be used for your initial risk assessment for a new business or renewal, or it can even be used as an initial independent information gathering for a claim situation. And mostly it is staying there. And you have these examples that you hear about of sensors being used for advanced warnings, with which you try to do some kind of a loss mitigation, right? The classic example that we keep hearing is use of water leakage sensors, and the very anecdotal example that you keep hearing is that typical water leakage is the one that causes most of the claims, both in terms of the frequency and size, and how that enables an early warning and a potential solution to keep the claims low. Instead of that becoming a large damage, it probably just a repair kind of a solution, right? If you think of these as, yes, there is an existing model where you have a policy that's underwritten and you have some sensors, you collect data, figure out how to augment the current process. But if you stretch it out, it immediately amends itself to in a couple of areas. Can you proactively integrate a service ecosystem, possibly with blockchain on that, and to offer more solutions and service solution in a kind of a you intervene more proactively to offer solutions? Or since you continuously are getting data, are there solutions that can enable continuous underwriting instead of just focusing on at a point traditional underwriting that's used? One of the interesting points that we have heard was there is already enough data in the industry about how IoT is enabling loss reduction. In fact, there was a case study recently where even leaving to their customers to implement the sensors that was sent by the carriers, there was enough data to suggest that a big chunk of a large amount was saved in terms of the losses. So when the query was followed up as to how do you plan to feed it back into your rates, and is there a way in the next few years that you have sufficient data to say that the presence of the sensors impact the average loss in some form, and is there a way you can underwrite it better? The carriers felt that yes, that's definitely in the offing, right? So the point is, you can generate new products with continuous underwriting being enabled by that. And from a data and analytics point of view, I'll just take one example in the same manner is, and we'll have a case study in the subsequent section where today you use that to do a claim profiling using a simple predictive analytics solution, for example, right? You basically decide whether it's a long tail or is it going to have any other complications? Is it above a certain size so that you can either take further mitigating actions or assign senior assessors and so on and so forth. Whereas, can you move on from there to basically even do a fully automated claim assessment, including your historical data and other AI technologies combined together, which enables a certain automated solution so that you can actually carve out products and create personalized products in a certain context beyond the risk, meaning certain technologies are enabled. It could be sensors, it could be other pieces. Can you then design certain products which will say that which will assure that you have a certain amount of control over your losses and so on, right? Or rather, more predictability on the losses that you have, so that you can design certain different products on that, right? So with that kind of an overall context, and this is just a sample, just to repeat, out of the various 10 disruptors we saw in the keynote, we have just taken a couple of examples, and blockchain is kind of obvious. You could be using it just for asset tracking. You could actually design products which fill certain gaps in current coverages with even triggered automatic payments and so on in a smart contract scenario with blockchain, right? What we will see in the next slide is kind of we are coming down from the top, where we are looking at broad implications, and then we are looking at how the technology is enabling, to narrow down to a claims ecosystem. What you see is something that HCL is bringing today to our customers, and I would like to present this in two broad categories, right? There is an existing claims process, and there is a need to do an intelligent automation around that, and HCL enables it directly by bringing together HCL solutions, IPs, and accelerators along with our partner product InsurTech ecosystem. What you see is a depiction of that. Obviously, the entire thing is backed by our insurance practice and delivery, and we have accelerators like Guidewire Claim Center based IATO. The classic problem that you see in RPAs and other automation is that they are binary. The solution that we have in IATO is that, can we dynamically orchestrate it to enable a no-touch, low-touch kind of a scenario, which is based on checkpoints, scores? There are certain things you can just let it flow through. Certain things may require a complex decision with a human SME. And of course, the implication is that as these decisions are being made, you can always implement an AI solution down the line for it. Now, on top of it, we have certain specific point solutions which are enabled by AI and ML. There are a couple of examples we are going to see on the US for intake automation and AI-based claim assessment for ClaimGenius, so I won't touch on that. The idea is that, think of it as a vertical slice across the entire claims ecosystem. All of these solutions can be looked at in its entirety to say that, hey, how can I implement advanced analytics, AI, computer vision, and so on and so forth, and make it as optimal as possible. But at the same time, as we have indicated on the side, how do you implement IoT and blockchain in a way to make it innovative? The second model that I'm talking about is, obviously, the new models require more experimentation, more innovation. So HCL, what we do is, we bring in our ecosystem, domain and technology ecosystem, and work with the carriers in what we call as a co-innovation scenario, where we work with them in a lab scenario. We iterate through the technologies, we iterate through the models, because obviously from a carrier side, both the business and technology teams have to be involved along with us. And we iterate through all of that till we get to an MVP. And that's how we enable this solution, right? Now, with this kind of a background, what we'll do is, we will deep dive into how two of the InsurTech examples are enabled. While they are part of the larger ecosystem that I'm showing in this slide, we'll deep dive into first within Omni US and what do they do within the intake automation piece. The second example we'll see is with the auto claim assessment using AI and ClaimGenius. And with that, we can take a few questions before I hand it over to Martin, and let me check if there are any questions. If not, we can do it in the end as well, right? So Martin, you can go ahead, and I'll keep monitoring, and if there are any questions, I'll intervene, right? Go ahead, Martin.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ranga. And thanks, Ranga and Peter, for your introduction. That resonates a lot with me, because we as Omnius see ourselves very much as a player that supports the optimization of the current model of traditional insurers. Our aim is really to intelligently automate the current claims process, and helping our customers really to move the current claims and the way how they manage claims into what today's customers really expect, which is an Amazon type of experience, by integrating AI and the capabilities of AI into the claims process. Now, this is not, a standardized type of project that you run, like a waterfall type of approach as we've been doing it back in the 70s and 80s. But basically, the way how we've learned to do that is very much focused on the business. And it's about, in the first step, as we see it, it's about building up trust in AI and in its results. And Ranga rightly outlined, so it's also about showing quick results, also from a financial perspective, directly through an MVP type of approach that typically for us doesn't take longer than 2 or 3 months, where the business can immediately and instantaneously see, well, what can AI do? Which value can it create? Which business case can I derive specifically for the business case analyzed, but also in order to extrapolate it through the entire P&C line, to give you an example. And for that reason, we are working predominantly in these first steps with the non-technical employees, really to see and make them feel, how AI can fundamentally help to change the way how claims adjusters are working, with the help of a technology like ours. Now, how do we do that? We typically do that first through the creation of a broad and deep databases. So whereas in the past, insurers have learned to manage their claims with as few data points as possible, now we are doing with our technology, we're turning the whole system upside down, and we are grabbing as much data as possible, as early as possible, from any means of communication with the end customer. Now that helps us in the last step, really to, on the one hand, replace the manual data processing. So we avoid manual downstream data acquisition. So the repetitive tasks that is cumbersome, that takes a lot of time, that is not very sexy, but at the same time is very costly. And with the help of our data that we grab at the very beginning of the process, we can really replace that. And on top of that, and most importantly, we can use that data to train cognitive AI models that even replace cognitive tasks such as completeness check, duplicate check, coverage check, and others. So we are really grabbing the claims, relieving the claims adjuster from the cumbersome tasks and making them an ambassador of the customer in his moment of truth. Now, how we do that, we're going to show on a high level on the next chart. Basically, what you see here is the standardized process that we typically pursue even multiple times within a claims process. So on the very left-hand side, what you see here is a very simplified way of the omni-channel communication with the end customer that typically happens via email, snail mail, apps, messaging, fax, even handwritten text. And we take a look at it holistically and grab, as outlined earlier, as many data points as possible to immediately, convert them in step number 2 into information. So to give you an example, step number 1, there is an email with an attachment coming in, and our system typically, identifies 4 different dates. And we classify, that one date is the incident date on a police theft declaration. Another one is the birth date on an ID card, and a third one is just the date on top of the letterhead. So it's really about making sense and bringing structure in unstructured type of data and information that prepares the ground then for step number 3, which is the AI-powered decision and recommendation framework that we propose to the claims adjuster so that he or she can make the best possible decision at that very moment. Now, if we want to move even one step further downwards and making it really concrete, then Ranga, if we can move on to the next chart, and that next chart builds up step by step. So what you see here on the left-hand side again is the omni-channel communication to the end customer. And on the very bottom, the different applications that typically reside within a core system that we need in order to manage the claim. And the core system might be a legacy application, back from the 80s or so, but it might also be a core system, a state-of-the-art core system like a Sapiens, a Guidewire, you name it. Now, what we do in this instance, in this context, is in step number 1, it's really about the cognitive information processing. So we take the email with its attachment, just to stick with that example, and we classify the email itself, we classify the attachment, we realize that the attachment in itself consists out of multiple documents, And within each one of those documents, we go down on a line item basis, classifying that and extracting the information, picking it and immediately pushing it in step number 2. And now, 2 clicks, because we immediately correlate that information and data with the domain and the underlying domain information. So if we stick to the example of an email coming in with an attachment, so we immediately correlate first name, last name, and address, whether there is an underlying policy related to that, and the attachment, whether the classified documents at that point theoretically match the policy that this customer holds within our underlying core insurance platform. With that information at hand, and that's the power of that type of approach, you even can overcome missing or incorrect type of information, because with a correlation like name and address, you don't necessarily need a policy number in order to trigger it from the core insurance platform, and still prepare the ground, ideally for straight-through processing. So with that said, we can then move on into the third step and say, well, in case we believe that it's a first notice of loss with the attached documents, we can validate whether this first notice of loss is complete. So have all documents been provided to create the claim? If not, we immediately trigger the interactive communication back to the claimant, requesting for the missing document. Or we move on to the formal coverage check, or we can even do the coverage determination, whether, let's say, for example, if the bicycle has been locked, or the flat has been locked when there was any intrusion. So all of that can either be directly processed straight through, and if that's the case, well, then we could automate the claim, and that's the next step. And after that one, the alternative is that we push it as a next best action into the inbox of a claims adjuster. So next best action is being triggered in case there's an inconsistency of information and data, or because of an underlying governance rule that, let's use an example, that a specific threshold requires always a manual intervention as defined by our customer. So the underlying business case, and as outlined by Peter at the very beginning, that basically productivity is on top of the radar screen, which I totally confirm. So the underlying business case is not only in that instance triggered by the automation of the claim as such, but at the same time by a next best action that based on the fact that the claims adjuster has a holistic, transparent, and data-driven overview of both the claim as well as the customer. The overall decision time frame a claims adjuster requires to manage a claim is being reduced by between 70 to 90%. So the business case is triggered by both the automation as well as, let's call it, the semi-automation of that type of approach. So with that said, that gives you a rough overview of technology that supports 2 trends as outlined by Peter: productivity as well as customer experience, enabling a claims adjuster to focus more directly on the customer, supporting the customer in the moment of truth, and delivering a superior customer experience, putting the customer back again into the center of claims management, as it was supposed to be from the very beginning onwards. And with that said, I hand over back to you, Ranga, and building the bridge to you, Raj, because I think where we really connect is we approach the claims from a horizontal layer, and we typically collaborate with players like Raj is doing, completing from both aspects, horizontally and vertically, delivering the best possible and ideally most automated claims experience we can. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think the other, just wanted to highlight one piece that Martin just mentioned, just to stress that point again, is if you really look at the way all these solutions are orchestrated, is they all sit on top of each other as separate layers. So they are not disruptive in terms of the implementation, but as an outcome, they are disruptive, right? Which goes back to what Peter mentioned initially and what I mentioned in my slides, that it's a plug and play ecosystem in a way. So the core systems that you see in the bottom they stay as it is, except for the integrations that we do on top of the solution. So OmniUS that Martin just described, it comes and sits on top. Obviously, there will be custom needs for each of the carrier ecosystem that we'll have to take care. But from an implementation point of view, they are not very disruptive, right? And when Raj is talking about his assessment solution, you will notice that it follows into a very similar structure. So go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, thanks, Ranga. Can you see my screen? Sorry, can you hear me, guys? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. And as Ranga, Peter, and Martin have touched base on how the overall InsurTech ecosystem is coming together, and we are basically innovating, I would say, the traditional models, right? That's where we fit into. Uh, Ranga have mentioned about the underwriting. Martin just showcased how the AI is basically doing the document analysis and settling up overall kind of a process. That's where ClaimGenius fits into. We are very focused onto the passenger line vehicles, and we are basically a part of the overall ecosystem. Where traditionally, right now, if you just like look at some of the numbers, there are about 25 million claims that get processed in US alone, right? And every claim takes a couple of hours, or in some cases, even the days, right? So that's where ClaimGenius comes into with its computer vision technology, and how we are basically automating the overall solution by using our technology. So just from the underwriting standpoint, what Ranga had mentioned, we can basically automate that whole pre-inspection experience or the underwriting experience. Even within the claims, if you look at the there are three categories, briefly, like minor, major, and the medium categories, where many of the claims, actually the large volume actually fits into that minor damage category. And the technology can basically automate the overall experience, as I think Ranga had mentioned about the low touch or a no touch kind of in claims, and that's where we are basically enabling that vision of the low touch or no touch by using this technology. uh, Ranga, if you can move into the next, I think, then yeah, next slide. Yep. So what you're seeing on the screen is how we are basically in the back end, we are automating overall ecosystem, overall traditional models and all that, but the customer experience is also very important. uh, and that's where basically we are bringing in that how do we basically provide our guided app, which is the first notice of loss app, that actually guides the customer to take the picture or the video of the vehicle, and that's all they need to do. They do not need to basically fill in any information about the vehicles, about the accident, you know uh, and that's once they basically submit all of those pictures or the videos, rest of the job is been taken care of the AI. The AI automatically figures out where these damages are. Is it a front of the vehicle or back of the vehicle? What are the different parts of the vehicle that has been damaged, and how accurately basically we do the damage classification as if a human is doing that assessment, right? So you are basically especially within this pandemic situation that we are in, this virtual claim is the requirement of today and tomorrow and the future. And that's where basically we are innovating this space by giving the best digital experience to the end consumer, as well as the field adjusters who just need to basically take the pictures of the video and then submit it. If you can move on to the next slide, Ranga. So, what a human does, right, in a typical scenario is they go around the car and they basically identify all these different parts, and they look at the how big the damages are and how big the dents and scratches and the cracks are, and where those are, the positions of those damages, and based on that they are basically um, come up with their recommendations about whether you need to replace that particular part or repair that part. If the airbags are blown, then is that vehicle is a total loss? What is the mileage on that vehicle? What year this make and year the vehicle is from? So all these things that they consider, and then they write their estimate, and which obviously takes a couple of days or hours in some of the minor damage cases. But that's where we are disrupting this, and we are basically looking at all these aspects using the computer vision, automatically detect all of these parts, automatically determine all of these damage classifications, airbags deployment, and so on and so forth, and then come up with those replace repair recommendation, at the same time the total loss recommendation. Within just a matter of 2.5 minutes, you get this full assessment. So you can imagine now how much time that you are saving. And in some of these use cases that I was talking earlier about, the minor damage claims, right? You can literally settle that claim within a matter of 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can basically push that assessment to the platform, like what Martin had showcased, and you can literally take that claim right from FNOL all the way to the claim assessment and settlement within a matter of few minutes. And you can imagine what kind of an ROI you would be bringing through this connected ecosystems. Uh, you can move on to the next slide, Ranga. Now, obviously, there are questions and challenges that how do you determine, or how do you give recommendations on the supplements? Because right now, if you look at, there are about 22% supplement that comes across, at least 3 4 supplements that the garages write for any of these vehicles, because they have to open up, and then they have to basically inspect the vehicle. So how cool it would be if AI could basically do even the internal damage assessment. So being the insurance carrier, you would get that right away, the insight of what are the external damages, but at the same time, what could be a possibility of the internal damages. And that's where we are basically bringing our algorithms, which is kind of an which is a differentiators in itself. And obviously, for behind every single recommendation that we provide, there has to be a confidence score and the thresholds. Not that AI can do the 100% assessment. I perfectly wants to be very blunt and honest here, and there would be a human assessment or the review that is going to required, but that review time is going to reduce with this kind of an insightful information that our AI can bring in with the internal damage assessment. You can move on to the next slide. Now, obviously, what is the most accurate results that you can get out of an AI is by having the good quality pictures and the good quality of the data. Today, many of these apps that's out there uh, doesn't really provide you that guided kind of an view to the customers. So what we are trying to bring, another a disruptor, is bringing a real-time AI on the edge devices itself. So it is in reality, it becomes a self-guided app, and it is going basically guide a customer where to stand, how to adjust the camera, adjust the light conditions automatically, because that ultimately is going to result into the better AI accuracies. So that's what some of the challenges currently that the industry have, and we are trying to basically bring a technology that can basically help to address those data acquisition problem, and at the same time, obviously, again, give a best customer experience. Because every now the adoption by the customers are increasing in order to use these FNOL apps, so it has to become that best experience, and that's what we are trying. You can move to the next one, Ranga. And there are many, and the technology, as we all know, AI is still evolving. It is still, industry is looking at it with some skepticism. But now the dial has changed. I mean, back 2018 when we started, or 2017, there was a lot of doubts and skepticism around the technology. But now, as you can see, everybody wants to adopt this technology. Of course, there are, they're basically testing the water kind of in scenarios. So the technology is evolving, but at the same time, there are many challenges that every AI company faces, not only ClaimGenius. There are light conditions, there are weather conditions where you can get a lot of false positive that can result into uh, uh, you know uh, the erroneous kind of an estimates, which could be a losses. So ultimately the optimization needs to happen, and that's what we are doing. uh, Across the globe there are many look and feel of a vehicle, which can basically also impact the overall assessment. So the approach has to be, sedans and hatchbacks and those kind of body types, rather than looking at Toyota or Honda individually. It's just not a scalable model. So we are basically taking our approach in order to fit the solution globally. Then there are a lot of almost like 40% of the data that right now getting captured, having those zoomed in kind of in pictures, right, where uh, a lot of AI is not compatible with it. So we are basically innovating and optimizing our algorithms and platforms by looking at those zoomed in pictures. As long as a human can identify a part from any zoomed in picture, or AI should be able to identify. In that way, it becomes a truly automated, a touchless claims as a reality kind of a scenario, and that's what we are working on. And there are many other use cases uh, within the space. By looking at the VIN number, by looking at the license plate, you automatically scan it, do the VIN decoding to get all the vehicle details. That obviously contributes toward the final assessment. So those are the kind of an innovation that continuously we are doing, continuously enhancing the experience of the users and the carriers. And we are basically fitting into a part of that ecosystem that Ranga has envisioned and brought together. So with that, I think if there are any questions, happy to answer that, but let me hand it over to Ranga.
Yeah, that's in fact we have a very important question, but before I answer that, just a point, right? In fact, we had this anecdote from one of our clients. While AI is clearly going through this phase where there is an obviously straight through case where the decisions can be allowed because they are pretty straightforward. And there are certain cases or categories where, yes, the decision can be recommended, but you need a human expert to validate it to move along, kind of a scenario. The client gave an anecdotal example where they went through a full-fledged traditional assessment, resulting in about $1,500 US dollars cost, only to realize that because of the deductible and all that, the actual settlement was for $300. So you can easily imagine where for a $300 they could have as well directly paid without incurring the $1,500 assessment cost, right? So when Raj was talking about those scenarios, and when Martin is talking about ways with which you can make the unstructured data available for this decision, whether it's a direct straight through scenario based on the AI decision or a human intervention, there is a very practical aspect which can directly contribute to the optimization of the cost behind. Right? So that's the piece I wanted to leave with you. So there is a question that was asked, where while this is obviously this is interesting, and clearly there is a lot of potential and value, but implementing such a complex transformation is also not easy. So what's your experience? So if I may go back to the claim ecosystem slide that I kind of showed, and just take a minute for that. Uh, this is interesting because we purposefully created this framework in a Lego block kind of a scenario, right? While it's theoretically possible for someone to take a vertical cut, like I mentioned, to say that, hey, I want to look at my claims end to end and just automate the heck out of it. The reality that we are seeing is we are looking at folks who are basically saying, hey, I'm running a guidewire claim center. Can I run an automation framework at that level where I can figure out what can be no touch, low touch? Or can I just do an auto assessment thing with ClaimGenius piece? Or can I just do an Omniverse piece? So think of it as a multi-year roadmap. So it's not like you are really constrained by trying to do a massive transformation project or multi-year initiative, because frankly, we all know that there is no appetite for that. The advantage is each one of the point solutions have their business case on their own, and by implementing it, if we are not handicapping ourselves in some way, right? They are all part of the larger solution where they fit in a particular category, right? So the response to that is, what we have seen is clients look at specific scenarios and business cases, implement that solution, but slowly they all add up to the larger transformation that we just discussed. There was one other question that, if I may, this is for you, Raj. The question is on how does the smart association detection of the inner parts work with image information? So if you can elaborate on that.
Absolutely. So it's a very challenging problem, first of all, to accept that. The way that our technology works, we look at every single aspect of the damages, right? And hence come up with a severity. So for example, let's see your bumper is literally cracked. So obviously there is a high severity impact from the front of the vehicle. And now also our AI basically considers the kind of a schematic, if I will, for that particular vehicle, right? So what comes next behind the bumper, behind the hood? It could be radiator, it could be the suspension bar, right? So our algorithm actually determines the severity of the damages, and at the same time, when we train our algorithms, we have looked into millions of the claims in the past and in those kind of situations, and that's how we basically come up with all those recommendations about even the internal part assessment. That's how the smart association works. Along with that, it also looks at whatever the associated parts with it. So it's not only the external and internal, but in between there are many of the associated parts that you need to look at. For example, if you need to, I'm just trying to give an example. In order to basically replace some part, right, or repair some part, you might have to basically remove and reinstall other associated part, right? Maybe the headlight or something else. But that's how our smart association algorithm looks at it, what is the severity of the damages, what is the kind of a part and the vehicle that we are looking at, what is the schematics behind about the overall that vehicle, and then we come up with the internal part assessment. So I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Raj. So there are a couple of more questions, but I'll combine them in the interest of time. But I think this may be our last question, so I'll combine both. The first part of the question is, given the cost differentials, how do you optimize replacement costs across the countries? And the second question is, it's basically AI and the availability of data, right? Because otherwise this is not going to make sense. And before I kind of let Raj or Peter and Martin also take a shot at it, there are a couple of aspects to this. The data availability, it falls into two aspects, right? One is the enterprise data, and the other one is the what we call as the ecosystem data. And Raj will answer that they actually have partners signed up in each of the geographies who are the standard providers of the data that goes into this. The second aspect that I want to highlight before I let Raj take the shot at it is, today the challenge is exposing the data rather than the data availability itself is, particularly for the carriers where there's a large legacy data system, and we didn't get a chance to kind of talk about it. The entire data ecosystem as a horizontal is a focus area. Think of it as a foundation on top of which all these things are getting built, right? So there are separate initiatives with which we can do that, and we have certain focus around that, where it's consumption-based models that we develop, right? Instead of trying to solve the entire world hunger problem, what we do is, today we look at who is using what for what outcome, right? Then we start targeting that data and just make it available so that we can slowly build up over time, instead of trying to bring a complete entire data set into one piece, and which obviously is going to have its own challenges, right? So Raj, go ahead, please.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a good question about, how do we basically do the replacement prices across the different geographies? I mean, the costs are different. So as Ranga, you rightly mentioned, we have partnered with, the estimatic platforms, which actually provides you all the OEM details, the OEM numbers, the part pricing, and other details about any of the vehicle. So in US, we are partnered with Michel, which is our estimatic data platform. In Europe, we are partnered with AutoVista or Schwake. In India, we are procuring our own data, and we have we are producing all those estimates. So depending upon the geographies, there are multiple data partners who actually provides the the pricing data, and that's how we come up with all those different estimates for those particular geographies.
So I think we just have 2 minutes left. One quick last question. I'll squeeze it in. In such an ecosystem, at what point do you detect fraud? And to be frank, I would give a short answer and have Peter kind of give a little bit more on that. First things first, we do not believe that you collect all the data and try to detect fraud, right? It's a multi-step process, and we try to deploy our solution. As you see on the screen, for example, Shift is one of our partners. This has to happen at all stages, to be frank, right? It's a cumulative effect. As and when more data becomes available, there is a certain pattern that emerges, and you try to do that. And we don't need to wait for accumulating everything possible to start flagging off things, right? So Peter, do you want to elaborate on that a bit, please?
No, well, I think you're right, and it's a good question. I think that there's also an element that when sort of I've seen when people start to have multiple sort of partners in the claims ecosystem, well, actually, how do they treat data? Which again, you could say also not only fraud but also something with data protection. And obviously, those are some of the things that you have to become better at and do it not only internally at your company, but think about the entire ecosystem. So it's not necessarily trivial, but definitely also a capability to think about as you do this. But again, I think what Ranga said earlier, I think the pragmatism in terms of try some use cases, get going, then perhaps at least initially it will be more controlled and not that huge, at least initially.
Yeah, the analogy I try to use is, I mean, it's a bit off to the topic we are discussing, but the analogy I use is the kind of the differentials that the doctors do typically, right? When you first go in and you have certain symptoms, there's a bunch of things they list as potential causes. And as and when you know more details and you do more tests and all that, it kind of narrows down the possibility. So that's the closest analogy I can think of for this scenario, right? I think we are almost there. It's just a few seconds left, so I think we should close it. So really a very interesting discussion. Lot of interesting questions, and if there are any follow-ups, please feel free to send it to us, and we'll figure out a way to get back to you on this. And just a quick round robin, Raj, Peter, and Martin. Any last words from you before we close?
No, I think this is a great ecosystem that we are building, and I'm glad that we are a part of the ecosystem and bringing some of the innovations and disruptions to the space and trying to change the traditional models. So thank you everyone for participation.
Yeah, totally agree. We all are stronger than all in one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thank you.